It's a classic piece of video game music, and it was written in under half an hour. That doesn't mean it's a bad song. 30 years on, and Final Fantasy's Prelude is perhaps the most iconic piece of music by one of the most celebrated composers of the past century, Nobuo Uematsu. It just means it's simple, and it's this simplicity that has allowed the Prelude to become one of the most enduring musical themes ever composed for a game. Essentially, the Prelude is a series of arpeggios, notes in a chord that are played in order of pitch. So, starting in C major, there are 4 ascending notes: C, D, E, and G. That's the first, second, third, and fifth notes of that chord. These exact 4 notes are played 4 times over in increasingly higher octaves, before reversing and doing the exact same thing all the way back down. Then the chord changes to A minor in this case, but the 1, 2, 3, 5 pattern remains, and this is the structure that constitutes most of the entire song. As a result, there's not much in the way of a unique melody to the Prelude. It's more of just a floating, ethereal progression of notes, perfect to lull you into the dreamlike, magical world of Final Fantasy. This simplicity was born out of necessity due to the limitations that Uematsu faced. Firstly was that of technology. The sound capabilities of the NES were minimal, with really only 3 basic channels available to work with. Secondly, and more specifically though, was a time limitation. The Prelude was the final song to be written for Final Fantasy I. Uematsu recounted how series creator Hironobu Sakaguchi came to him at the 11th hour and gave him 30 minutes to create a piece of music for the title screen.
そんな曲がファイナルファンタジーシリーズでずっと使われるとは夢にも思わなかった。
But it was, with the Prelude returning in sequels to once again usher you into a grand new fantasy adventure. And certainly its renown was built in part thanks to pure conspicuousness, being the first thing you hear every time you boot up many of the games. But as the series evolved, so too did the Prelude. For Final Fantasy IV, with the increased audio capabilities of the Super Nintendo, which could now begin to imitate real instrument sounds, the Prelude was a natural fit for the harp. The word arpeggio literally comes from the Italian word arpeggiare, meaning to play on a harp. The SNES's 5 additional sound channels also allowed some accompaniment to be added to the piece, giving flesh to the bony arpeggios in the form of a brand new countermelody. And since then, the Prelude has seen dozens of interpretations within the series, from epic orchestral renditions and divine choral performances to poppy electronic remixes. Now, this isn't anything too extraordinary. Many game franchises will reuse musical motifs and have evolved over the years as the technology has advanced. But what makes the Prelude so special is its sheer prevalence within the Final Fantasy series, and how varied its use is too. What started as a last-minute overture to a fantasy adventure has grown to represent the series as a whole, even overshadowing the official main theme. The Prelude is no longer just title screen music. It's used to score emotive story moments. It's incorporated into area themes. And it even underpins the best pause screen music of all time. Don't at me. The Prelude's ability to do this, its versatility, is a direct result of its inherent simplicity. Arpeggios are a very common musical structure, and a helpful tool often used by composers to lushen up a sound. So it's quite easy to just slip the prelude into a piece to make it sound more Final Fantasy-y. This was done wonderfully in the intro to Final Fantasy XV, which combined the prelude with Florence and the Machine's cover of Stand By Me.
And the moon is the only light we'll see.
This ties the song's themes of friendship and loyalty into the context of the game. Other tracks use it as a building block, such as XIII-2's Eclipse, in which the prelude motif acts as a jumping off point for a haunting new theme. Then there's the FF7 track Anxious Heart, which starts off with its own unique melody on the harp, but when the flute takes over the lead, the harp fades into the back and discreetly morphs into the prelude, falling into that familiar 1-2-3-5 pattern and hitting me with a small pang of homesickness. Even though it doesn't traverse the entire distance here, the distinct rise and fall pattern of the prelude makes it super easy to recognise, even when half the notes are missing. It's remarkable just how many different ways the prelude can be adapted. It would almost be possible to build an entire soundtrack around it. And in fact, that's exactly what the best Final Fantasy soundtrack of the past decade did. I am, of course, talking about 2015's free-to-play mobile game, Final Fantasy Brave Exvius. That wasn't a joke. I can't be the only one with goosebumps right now. Brave Exvius' composer, Noriyasu Agamatsu, handles his first Final Fantasy score with deep respect, bringing orchestral life to melodies reminiscent of the 16-bit era. When talking about balancing the new and old sound of Final Fantasy, Agamatsu said, "In particular, I felt the sound of the harp was key, so I inserted harp parts wherever I could. As a result, variations of the prelude appear all over Brave Exvius' soundtrack, from dungeon themes to the main battle theme, and the main menu music, which teases you with the first ascending half twice before indulging you with the rest of it. Many of the tracks that don't directly reference the prelude still feature the arpeggiating harp, adding some variety to the part while still remaining reminiscent of the sound. It's Agamatsu's creative implementation of the prelude and the respect he shows for the old Final Fantasy tunes that makes me think he'd be the perfect choice to score Final Fantasy XVI. But I think Brave Exvius shows off the true power of the prelude. Not only can it stand alone as a strong musical theme, but its simplicity allows it to be easily incorporated into a huge variety of other tracks. Its distinct musical shape makes it malleable, able to retain its identity even after undergoing dramatic structural changes. And 3 decades of widespread use across the series has loaded it with enormous nostalgic emotional power. The prelude may be humble in its appearance, but it's the hardest working little tune in video game history. To put it simply, it's genius.